Welcome to the Week in Italian Startup, where we discuss the latest highlights happening in the Italian tech and investment ecosystem. We are going to wrap up what happened pre-Easter and post-Easter a little bit. And the movement kind of slowed down, of course, during holidays, always a little bit on the slow side. But still, there's a few interesting deals happening, even announced or unannounced. So that's interesting. So let's get going. Starting from Casavo, raising 19.5 million out of the 30 million in convertible debt, as basically the company is in the process of executing a turnaround plan. So starting kind of strong, Casavo is an interesting case. We talked about Casavo before. I think the equity part and actually the whole financing structure is kind of interesting, because what we've seen is pretty much that in July 2022, Casavo managed to raise about 400 million euro, which was split between 100 million euro in equity and pretty much the rest in venture debt. So interesting financing. You don't see that very often. Venture debt is something relatively new to Italy, very much used, of course, in other ecosystem. But I thought it was very interesting to see this kind of structure. What is your first take on this one, Nick?
Yeah, I agree with you. Casavo is one of those startups that thrived particularly in the zero interest rate phenomenon. Basically, they started out buying on the cheap side and reselling for a higher price houses. But this was like something that used to work in a completely different environment. And they started evolving the model. And they're in the middle. I mean, in the newsletter, I mentioned a turnaround is in part a turnaround, in part a pivot. So basically, they're evolving the business model into a new direction. That includes restructuring the firm a little bit. I think there was some news about the layoffs at Casavo, so changing the type of the company structure, the type of people working for Casavo. I mean, we see where we go from here.
Yeah. So basically, just to give the listener a few financial information, basically 2022, Casavo had a revenue of about 215 million, with a negative EBITDA of 28.8 million, and then basically liquidity for 55 million. So yeah, it's I mean, massive, definitely massive growth. Still, of course, trying to get to break even. So I'm sure the founders are trying to get that as quick as possible. And but in terms of investor, it feels like they've graduated to like a different level of sophistication, if you will, with the story of venture debt and with big names also in the investor pool. So just to mention, Exor basically is essentially like participated before in the 100 million equity, but also like is doubling down in this round. But also Unicredit, essentially, Neva Group from Intesa San Paulo. So a few interesting investor on the equity side. Not to mention actually the venture debt part, which actually includes people like I believe Goldman Sachs and DE Shaw in general. So that's pretty impressive, I would say. And so the thought I had is that when is actually venture debt appropriate for this kind of rounds? Because maybe there is a connection between anything that is like venture debt and the kind of company that fundraise. So I don't know what's your thinking, because we don't see that much often. So I was wondering, is there any specific kind of vertical that is better when it comes to venture debt?
I don't know whether it is a matter of vertical or a matter of maturity and model. Uh, as I said, venture debt is a different beast than equity capital. Even though it has some of the mechanics of equity, of course, there are warrants, there are means to transform that into equity, but that's not the goal mostly. Um, and of course, it depends on the use you want to make it, because so you probably wouldn't raise venture debt to sustain R&D or stronger in the expenses in a software startup. But if you need to acquire assets on the side and you're able to then um, generate marginality out of those assets, venture debt can be a tool. But if you see venture debt with that lens, that's basically an alternative to traditional debt. And then the consideration to be made is, am I, as a startup, too risky to get to traditional debt financing? So I need a different type of player to provide financing that can understand the type of risk that I'm getting into, and so on and so forth. So, long story short, I don't have a quick answer whether there is a specific vertical. I have the feeling that it really depends on the model and whether you need finance to support the acquisition of an asset that you can quickly monetize in some way.
Interesting. All right, moving on. Nouscom raised an additional 7 million into Series C round from Angelini Ventures. So, what is interesting about the round, of course, is that seeing like corporate players, of course, doubling down on bigger rounds. I would say that's the first kind of insight. The second one is that basically we've seen this happening before. So this company has a success, well, is showing a successful history of fundraising, also from the corporate side, and the technology that they're developing for anti-cancer treatment. It's pretty groundbreaking. So essentially, I'm just going to try to summarize it super quick, as I usually do with biotech in general, even though I'm completely ignorant on the issue. So essentially, they're working on neoantigens, which are molecules that are unique to tumor cells. Some are general across population, some are very specific with individuals. And essentially, the idea here is to use those neoantigens to target specific like therapeutical applications. So essentially, the idea is to make like laser application of certain technologies that rely on identifies these specific elements of the carcinogenic cell, and actually have your own immune system to actually fight against it. So very, very interesting, very groundbreaking to my eyes, and that's definitely something toward personalized treatment in general. I mean, medicine is developing like extremely quick, is becoming like extremely personalized on different levels, and every year we have more and more in technology to make this happen. So very, very interesting, I would say.
Yeah, yeah.
Awesome. So let's talk about Quantonation. So basically, Quantonation is one of the first early stage VC fund dedicated to deep physics and quantum technology. So this is like a new term, deep physics, and I never heard about it,
I
but I
just
thought it was
learned about
interesting.
it. Thank you, Jack.
Nice. So, what is interesting is that essentially Lifty joined Quantonation and Stellantis Venture in a 3.2 million round in Steerlight, a LiDAR startup from France. But also, Quantonation invested in Quantum Italia, deep tech investment vehicle created by Scientifica VC. So, very interesting to see this like play when it comes to like specific quantum technology, and we've seen the rise of like specialized VC that are not only investing like directly in companies, but are also trying to have a broader portfolio strategy. So, what is your thinking on this, Nick?
Well, I think that I agree with you in particular. And in this specific case, I think that as quantum computing becomes closer to reality, or the quantum technology, not just computing, because it's not just only computing, it gets closer to being production ready. We see more funds verticalizing on the sector, as you see a path to value creation, up to liquidity potential. It is interesting to see one of these players starting to operate right now. Uh, I mean,
Let's talk about cryptography and cybersecurity. So, P101 SGR and Sizero Euveka entered the capital of DataKrypto with a total investment of 3 million euro. So the movement in cybersecurity, it's something that we observe repetitively, and definitely Italy has been like moving extremely fast on different technology. Let's talk for a second about DataKrypto. So DataKrypto has an interesting story, and I wonder whether that's going to be the future of like Italy versus a mix of Italian and foreign sort of structure. So essentially, the company was funded in Silicon Valley from a researcher in cryptography in particular. They recently opened also a branch in Rome. So now they have a team of about 20 people that are actually working on both sides of the planet, which is interesting. And yeah, what they're developing is that a very, very interesting technology, which I think is pretty much the gold standard right now of cryptography. And then Unique, you know more than I. So this is called homomorphic encryption. So essentially, in general, for the listener, this is a form of encryption that enables computation to be performed on encrypted data without necessarily decryption. So essentially, you can get you can train model, you can use those data for computational purposes without necessarily breaking into the privacy structure. So imagine the wide use case in this situation. So extremely fascinating technology, very, very deep, I would say, when it comes to math and algorithmic sort of structure. And yeah, interesting company structure. So those are one of the kind of structure that can benefit from being on both sides, both in the US and in Europe.
Yeah, Jack, you said it all. A very interesting vertical in the cybersecurity space. So morphic encryption is one of the areas where there is a lot of buzz going on with the prospect of solving the huge data privacy problem. I mean, as you mentioned, machine learning in particular is very hungry for data, but we are getting close to saturating the access to publicly available data. Now we need access to the private data, but that raises the privacy question. And homomorphic encryption seems to be one of the best answers to this question. Um, Allowing the computation of the application of computation, automatic computation or search capabilities to data without exposing privacy information about the data, private information about the data. So very interesting. And in the current regulatory environment, potentially quite explosive.
And it looks like, I mean, Italians are good scientists. I mean, you also mentioned in the latest newsletter that a lot of papers not in AI are actually comes from Italian researcher, which are just, Germany is just above us. So with encryption and AI, I mean, that's very interesting. Definitely in the forefront of what's going to happen in the connection between tech and the science world.
Yeah, yeah. The only issue that I mean, as I just you may notice from the outside is that something breaks between publishing paper and getting research out there, and getting research to the market in our ecosystem at least. But from a certain point of view, it's understandable as we witness the amount of resources that in the US, in China, in the UK, or in France, to name just our neighbors, resources that are deployed and made available to the market in AI in particular. I mean, just the other day, Microsoft basically acquired the company for like a few billion. Crazy.
I agree. Big challenge for Italy. Just connecting the two dots, which is pretty massive, and still working on it more and more. Every year there is like a more and more hope, I would say, but definitely there is this missing component.
Mm.
All right, Nick. Thank you so much. This concludes this week's episode of the Week in Italian Startup. We hope you find all the information interesting, and I'll see you all the listener next week.
Ciao, Jack. Ciao, everybody. Have a great week.